Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another book review on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we're taking a look at a book that is brand new on the market, the Modele 1866 Chassepot, an Illustrated History, researched, written, and drawn by Guy and Leonard A-R-West. I believe that is Alston Roberts West. These guys are not specifically French rifle enthusiasts like some people you might have seen, but they are particularly, as far as I can tell, interested in black powder breech-loading rifles of this time period. So, in fact, the introduction to the book specifically says this is hopefully going to be the first in a series of books on rifles of that period. So they will be following this with one on the Dreyse, one on the Poteville's Lindner, and hopefully more beyond that. What's cool about this is there's very little actual written, detailed information about the Chassepot out there, or there wasn't until now. And it is a rifle that is very interesting both historically and mechanically. So of course mechanically, you have the whole needlefire system. Paper cartridges, this literal needle that jabs into the cartridge to hit a primer and detonate. The whole idea of the Luftkammer, as the Germans originally did it on the Dreyse needlefire rifles, the combustion chamber behind the cartridge. There are a lot of very interesting technical aspects to making this work. Now, when the French adopted the Chassepot, needlefire technology was nothing new. The Germans had developed it with the Dreyse in the early 1840s. The French decided to adopt it because they were concerned about the long-term ability to produce high-quality metallic cartridges, and they figured it would be a lot easier to make paper cartridges. And there's some validity to that decision, although it did ultimately turn out to be the wrong decision. What makes the Chassepot very historically interesting is that when it was introduced, it really was massively superior to the Dreyse rifles. It was smaller caliber, it was more accurate, it had better obturation, better gas sealing, a much longer effective range. This was really kind of one of the French secret weapons that would be used in the Franco-Prussian War. Unfortunately, for all the good that it did, it wasn't enough to actually help the French win the war. They lost it, in large part due to things like Prussian artillery that was substantially superior to French artillery. However, Prussian troops and the other German state troops involved in the Franco-Prussian War really took a substantial beating at the hands of the Chassepot. Volleys from these things at really extended ranges, like literally out to 1,200–1,300 meters. You know, you've seen sights on some of these rifles graduated out that far, and you have to look at those and go, why on earth would they ever do that? You can't even see a target out that far. Well, the Franco-Prussian War was just at the tail end of this time period when armies really did fight standing up in ranks and marching across large fields. And I tell you what, an entire regiment of Prussian infantry you can see at 1,200 meters, and the French did see them and made some pretty inflicted some pretty devastating casualties on Prussian formations using Chassepot rifles, like, by the way, that one. Anyway, the book here covers both of these sides of the story. In fact, it does a lot more than that. It starts out by looking at some of the rifles that led up to the development of the Chassepot, because it didn't just form out of thin air one day. There were a number of other systems that were considered by the French. There were a few that were adopted in small numbers. And they're from this period of paper cartridges and early breech loaders, and there's some really creative systems that were tried. Not necessarily more effective, but interesting certainly to look at. And then there is the manufacture of the Chassepot. When it was put into production, it was put into serious production. We're talking within a couple of years having hundreds of thousands, if not more than 1 million Chassepot rifles on hand in French reserves. They didn't manage to get them all actually out to the troops in time, but man, they made a lot of them. And not just at the French arsenals, but also through commercial manufacturers. So they subcontracted to a French company, cahen-lyon, and those guys didn't have the capacity to produce enough rifles, so the company subcontracted to a wide variety of international arms makers, and you end up with Chassepots manufactured in Spain, in Austria, in England, all over Italy, Belgium, basically every place that had an arms-making industry made Chassepots, and that adds a whole bunch of extra complexity and detail and interest to the collectible side of the rifles. These would continue to be produced after the Franco-Prussian War as well, and the book does talk about the various iterations that were made in the development, the different markings. Of course, they started as imperial manufactured guns, and by the end of production, they were being manufactured by the Third Republic, the emperor being deposed and gone. Book ends with some discussion of the adaptation of the Chassepot rifle into the Gras rifle, which the French would use afterwards in the 1870s and 80s. And it also talks substantially about German conversion and capture and use of the Chassepot, which is more significant than you might think. German cavalry in particular were incredibly badly armed relative to their French counterparts. They had basically muzzle-loading pistols for all practical purposes. And while after the 1871 Mauser was adopted, initial production was pushed towards infantry rifles, which left these cavalry guys having just taken a severe beating from the French and not able to get the modern rifle that was being produced in the German states. And so they actually converted massive numbers. We're talking hundreds of thousands of captured Chassepot rifles to 11mm Mauser, as well as using some of them in their original paper cartridge chambering. So there's a lot of discussion about the different types of conversions that were done and when and how they're marked and how they can be identified. A lot of really good information in here. Now, one interesting quirk of this book is it mentions on the cover it is written, researched, and drawn by Guy and Leonard A-R-West, and in fact, I would say about half of the illustrations in this book are actually hand-drawn to a very high standard. It's something that I didn't anticipate seeing. It's something you don't often see in modern books today, and the initial assumption is, well, why would you draw it when you could just take a picture of it? And it's, when you actually look at these illustrations, it's clear that by hand drawing them, it's possible to really bring out specific detail on markings or other subtleties that may not be easy to get in a photograph. So the drawings actually don't detract at all from the book. They're really quite good. And they're very, very lifelike, very realistic, very well done drawings. So of course, you're probably seeing some of that in the overview of the book right now. In total, this is about 145 pages. It is being printed in the UK by Woodfield Publishers. Price of the book is £45, plus the shipping wasn't extravagant to get it to me here in the US. I don't remember exactly what I paid for shipping, but a little bit expensive for a soft cover, relatively small book, but the information in here you will find nowhere else. So if you're interested in the Chassepot, it is definitely a book to check out. And certainly if you're interested in breech-loading rifles of the mid-1800s at all, definitely, early breech-loading rifles, definitely a book to check out. Because there's a lot of discussion of the military usage and how these compared to other rifles at the time, discussion of the other rifles that the French used when they were pushed at the end of the Franco-Prussian War, siege of Paris, and so on. So, not sure what else there is to say about it. I have a link in the description text below to where you can order it direct from the publisher. I'll also have a link where you can pick it up on Amazon.uk. Not quite the same thing as Amazon.com, but for some of you guys in Europe or England, you may prefer to go through Amazon.uk. So we'll have that down there as well. Very cool book. Very happy to have read it. Got a lot of good information out of it. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it too. Thanks for watching.